Hi, everyone. How are you doing today? We're going to get our session started. My name is Matthew Farr. I'm the Global Chief Marketing Sciences Officer for WRAP. We have an exciting presentation to you today, or for you today, about really kind of unlocking the power of your tools, your MarTech, your data. And I have my trusted partner, Todd, that's going to help me with this presentation.
Hey everybody, it is an honor to be here and I'm so excited. It's good to see some friendly faces out there and smiles, and for all you veterans, since Day Software was purchased by Adobe, I think this is my 12th or 13th in-person Adobe Summit. So it's nice to be back, it's an honor to be up here, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm Todd Schwartz and I am our Global Digital Platform Lead and I'm part of Credera. Back to you.
Thank you, Todd. So we have some kind of fundamental premises as we go into this presentation, but one really important one. If you look around today, I've noticed a few things. You see a lot about hyper-personalization. You see a lot about doing things at scale. You see things like agentic architecture starting to emerge, and you see things about unifying the customer experience. But our basic premise is that the process of creating the work has to be unified if the experience for the customer is going to be unified. Those two things cannot be separated. And what we're going to talk to you about today is how to get there and some best practices and what should you do Monday morning to be able to pay off the promises of your investments in data, in tech, and personalization. So this adorable little child looks to me to be holding the violin in the right way. I don't know much about the violin, but the reason we're showing you this picture is that everybody has access to that violin. Everybody has access to the same MarTech tools, to the same data in many instances. But what really sets you apart and where you go from playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star to Bach or Beethoven is how you bring it all together, how you orchestrate it, how you unify it. And we have found there's kind of 6 key things that you need to do to be able to make that progression from Twinkle Twinkle Little Star to Bach. And we're going to walk through that today. We're going to talk about people, process, and platform. We're going to talk about how do you integrate data into thinking about planning and automating customer journeys. We're going to talk about the importance of connected data. Todd has some great content on that. We're going to talk about the power of prediction to anticipate customer needs and how you can read those signals and activate them seamlessly. Talk about the power of pre-staging and aligning your content to intelligence and signals about what's going to drive engagement, and then being able to do that at scale through always-on learning, improving and demonstrating value back to the business, thinking like an investor, almost thinking about it as a venture capitalist does. And if you want that next series of funding, you have to unlock the performance that you've made those commitments. So to get started, thinking about people, process, and tools. So this is really about when you buy some tech or when you make an investment in data, looking across your organization and assessing your capability as a data-driven marketer. And so that means a few things. One, it means looking at your people. Does the marketing team have a sufficient technical understanding of what the platforms can do and the dependencies? Is there a high-value set of use cases in a library that's ready to be implemented? Do you have enough data science and data engineering and MarTech talent to be able to do this across brands, products, markets, so you can really drive that scale? And the second part of that assessment that's very important to me is thinking about what data do you have? We've never encountered a client that didn't have enough data, but we have often encountered clients where the data is fragmented, it's siloed, it doesn't have the blessing of attorneys to be able to use it. So it's being able to score your capability in terms of the maturity to use data as a marketer, but also your ability to activate that data inside your MarTech platforms. I know Todd has a lot of experience kind of looking at the technical side of this when we do a capability assessment.
Well, with everything is you have people and process and data, you need to have the platform that's enable it. And of course, if you don't know, then probably like many of you, we look at how you do a maturity assessment and a MarTech assessment of your platform. And the key there is not necessarily to look at technology for the sake of technology, but understand what is it you want to activate, what do you want your customers or consumers to see, and work your way backwards. What are those use cases, and do you have the connected architecture, do you have the connected data to really power those? And we've thought about a very simple way to break that down. And for us, it's just about how you go and enable that. So back to you.
So if you're thinking about our process, go into step 2. Armed with that capability assessment, you can then look at a very important artifact. This seems very simple. It's a customer journey. We might call it an infinity loop. But what's really important about this is it gives your data and your technology a teleological purpose, a reason for existing. And we like the customer journey because the marketing department is organized around the customer journey. Your data needs to be tagged and tracked around the customer journey. So, if you're standing up Adobe Analytics, you need to be able to have a taxonomy. So inside of your Adobe platforms, you know that that data is aligned to a certain phase or a certain step in this customer journey. And so to click into this is an example from some of the work that we've done with automotive clients, clicking into the consideration phase of the customer journey. What we have built is a set of assets and tools, but also a destination for marketers so that they can take data that's often very abstracted and embed it into the decision-making process so they understand what's happening in the journey, but importantly, what they need to do to go from insight to activation so they can monetize that data and monetize their platforms. So this will play for a few minutes, but what you're looking at here is an example of where a marketer would go to see each of the different events along the journey leading up to that consideration moment for purchasing a vehicle, and the integration of 0, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd-party data into that tool so that the marketer knows that something is happening at the journey. Maybe page views on the model detail page are down. Perhaps content isn't working as hard as it should. So it's the ability to interrogate that data across the journey, package up those findings using also things like third-party data, Mintel reports, JD Powers, so that you can package up really a brief and make it available to the marketing team. The other important point about this, and Todd's going to talk about data in a moment, is thinking beyond marketing. Getting marketing data into your platforms is important, but if you're an automotive brand, you need inventory data so you're not driving people to an experience where there is an appropriate vehicle. You need to be able to optimize, the way you're buying paid search in alignment to demand that you're seeing for certain vehicles. So think across the enterprise, and these insights can get packaged up. You're finding an opportunity to minimize friction for an EV-curious consumer. You have a recommendation at the bottom, and then the ability to package this up, submit it through a tool or a platform like Workfront, so you can then collaborate with someone else in the marketing department that can help you look at these insights and make a decision about how an audience, about how content could be activated in Adobe Journey Optimizer, for example. But this all starts with good data, and Todd's going to walk you through how we think about getting to the appropriate type of data architecture and schemas and really accelerating speed to value with our approaches.
Thank you, Matt. And like Matt said, how do you make this possible? How do you enable it? Well, here is an example of a reference architecture that should be familiar with most of you, especially the people who have a technology bent. And what I've done is place your typical Adobe technology products up on here. And I'm not going to go into any of these because honestly, that's what this whole week is about learning all these products. But you can see I've added things like Workfront, where you're doing marketing resource management and workflow. I've put AEP, where you're having decisioning and single view of a customer and orchestration. I've put Experience Manager and Marketo, where you're doing some of your channel activation. And then, of course, CJA, where you're doing some of your measurement. The key here is you want connected data and you want a connected architecture. But that's not enough. If you want connected intelligence, then I would argue you need to complement that with where you add advanced analytics. And that advanced analytics allows you to take models that you're creating, kind of like we heard about this morning, where you could take some of your own agents, some of your own AI ML models, and apply them into that architecture. And even that isn't enough, because you may even want to increase exact precision. And the way you can do that is use things like Omni data. And what does that do? That brings you deep audience segmentation models that can supercharge the way that you're doing precision. So you could, those moments that matter when you're triggering through AJO, and then you're sending that exact message to your customer, and then you're capturing those signals with CJA, you're bringing that back in, and you're enhancing that and amplifying that through all of your advanced models. And Matt's going to talk about those models. But to make this easier, I'm not going to go through all the detail here, but we have thought about how do you go, and most people that build models, 75% of them never see the light of production. How do you get them in production easy? Well, we've thought about that. We've created schemas and schema loaders and accelerators that allow you to create those landing zones and those analytic models. We've created Terraform scripts that allow you to build those production environments. So we've thought through how to make that automation simple for you and combine it into your CI/CD pipeline, because we know this is the way that you truly create that connected intelligence into the way that you're doing your precision marketing. Back to you.
Thank you, Todd. So thinking about activating prediction. So we're all probably very familiar with kind of how do we drive personalization from an algorithmic perspective. You've got implicit strategies where you can look at maybe a visitor to a website is browsing certain type of content that can be used as a trigger to drive some kind of downstream personalization based on that browsing behavior. It can be explicit content. Maybe you've surveyed someone on the website using some data capture mechanisms to develop some kind of progressive profiles, and people are telling you what they want. That can be a trigger to drive personalization. But what we have found is to truly do this at scale and to drive the kind of anticipatory motions that are required to engage customers and orchestrate that throughout the technology stack, you need to leverage some ML and AI. And what we have built at Omnicom, particularly across OPMG, we have a lot of data scientists working on a lot of complicated problems with the sole purpose, though, of being able to use that intelligence and drive it downstream through the MarTech stack to drive better customer experiences. So we built a library of about 800 models. And again, going back to the customer journey, these models are aligned to each stage of the journey. So it's no longer, well, how are we going to go use this model that we just spent a lot of money to create? It's predetermined where it is going to be used because we've done the hard strategic work of thinking about the role of data and technology across the customer journey. So here we're looking at demand identification and another automotive example. This example, actually, all of these models touch north of $1 billion in revenue for one of our clients. This is about predicting when someone is in market, the vehicle that they are going to be interested in. But it's also about after-sales management, how to drive them to the dealership for service. When they have lapsed, being able to predict what kind of offer, what kind of recommendation is going to bring them back into the dealership. So you've got all of this predictive intelligence that allows you to take these various signals and systematically organize them into an algorithmically created audience that is aligned to this strategic journey. And this allows our clients to move a lot faster, and it allows them to start to see the value from tools like real-time CDP very, very quickly, because you've made these big bets. A lot of us work in publicly traded organizations, or we have clients that are publicly traded organizations. What do they have to do? Report numbers to the street every 3 months. And these kind of big capital expenditures have a timeline to value, and this allows our clients to accelerate that value and see the benefit of data and really making that data available across the entire customer journey. And so thinking about, we predict content, we predict audiences, we predict channels, again, all seamlessly orchestrated around the journey.
And you can imagine that each of those are triggered by AJO, and then we're capturing those signals.
Yeah, and you feed it right back into the model, update your prediction, and continue to drive more data-driven experiences. Kind of the second to last area we would like to cover is about the role of content. Again, think about the way we're stepping through this. It's very logical. That's very important, because if we want to turn agents loose in this kind of environment, it can't be chaos. It needs to be systematic. It needs to be logical. So we need to think like that and operate like that. And so we're now stepping to a very important phase of our process. It's thinking about what content we need to make and where does that content need to live. And for many of our clients, content budgets are quite significant. However, there is not enough emphasis placed on learning about what's already out in the world across paid, owned, and earned channels, and how those patterns of engagement with content can be used to inform content production decisions, but also content decisioning decisions. I'll say it again. Content production, what should you make based upon what you know is going to work, and then being able to align that through decisioning logic about deploying it at the right time into the right channel. So we've developed a tool called Content Intelligence that goes from a mass of content, and this example is from a luxury client, luxury auto, luxury retail, but you need to be able to set up an industrialized listening system to bring in all of this atomized content that lives across paid, owned, and earned channels. These engagement patterns tell you a story. And what you're looking at here, so kind of the see and the say, is being able to apply a taxonomy to all of these images and all of this content, the theme, the tone, the stage of the journey, the type of messaging that was used, the audience that it was targeted to, and derive intelligence from that at scale, and then being able to leverage that intelligence and dig into it. So this is an example where we're looking at a particular brand, all of their content by a specific type of meta tag. So we have that tagging in the data so we can understand the factors that are driving engagement. And what you see here is the ability to take those patterns of engagement and start to understand the volume of content, the engagement with that particular content. So you have these hotspots of where there's perhaps some opportunity, kind of arbitrage opportunity to make more of some content that's getting a lot of engagement, but perhaps is not enough volume. And then leverage AI to make predictions. And this is simple but very powerful because it's a decision support tool. This allows a marketer to make different content decisions in terms of how is it designed? Does a human appear in that particular image? Those kind of editorial decisions that have to be made. And what you're looking at is the ability to then predict the engagement that you will get with that content based on those changes. So you have just set up with this process a very powerful workflow where you're going from content intelligence, feeding that into the briefing process about what should get made or what should get adapted, predicting how it is going to perform in market, and then that gives you the confidence to say, go make this, put this into your DAM, put this into Content Hub, so you've governed the process with ML and AI to make high-quality content that can then be distributed across channels, and you have the confidence that it's going to drive the engagement that you need in order to continue to move customers through the customer journey. And once you've done that, the fun begins. So you've got to start the process of continuing to learn and to optimize, again, anchoring back to the journey, because then you can go, these are the experiments that we're going to run this quarter. And when I say experiments, do I mean A/B and multivariate experiments? Of course I do. But it's not just that. You should be running tests and running experiments with new data sources that you've collected through progressive profiling strategies, new ways of working, new types of models that you are using, because then you can go right back to your leadership team and have a board-level presentation about the investments that they have made, how they have been deployed across the customer journey, and the value that you are recognizing. But you're also then codifying new ways of working, you're establishing a playbook, and you're able, as a MarTech expert, as a data scientist, as a data engineer, to be able to really kind of lead the way in terms of setting the transformation agenda and the value recognition that you're going to get from these platforms.
And we've talked about a connected architecture, then we talked about connected intelligence, and then we talked about content intelligence. And when you have this always on loop, the key I'd like to share is that you don't have to do everything day one. When Matt talked about those models, think about how you deploy those models. What is the high value areas and moments in time that you want to get to your clients and your customers, I should say. And how do you then start to deploy those and then use the ROI, use the cost efficiency from those to fuel your next set? So begin to do this sort of not just systematically, but almost from a roadmap perspective, and let your success build and fuel your next set of initiatives. And to me, that's the other part of this continuous loop, is where you use to fuel your ROI and use to fuel your next things. Deploying all that at once would be daunting, but I think showing success will breed more success and will also unlock potential dollars.
And so, as you can see, we're very much about being able to conduct with confidence. So bringing all of these different players, all of these different musicians together across the organization around data, tech, creativity, and strategy, and really being able to lead the way and orchestrate your way to value out of the platforms. Again, everybody has the same equipment in many respects, a lot of the same data, but it is how you put them into practice and how you lead that change within the organization that is going to allow you to recognize the value from these investments. And she looks pretty kick-ass to me, so it certainly motivates me to be able to do this with our clients. And if you do that, you will become a maestro. And it's spelled with an AI for a reason. We didn't want to belabor the point about the role of AI in the platform. We're going to be hearing a lot about that. We have heard a lot about that. But I want to kind of walk you back just a moment ago. It's like the way we orchestrated this process is key to being able to start to think about the way you use ML, AI, Gen AI, and agentic and agents inside of an agentic architecture to be able to organize all of these processes and work with you, not against you, to be able to set your strategy. Start with good, clean data. Think about how you leverage ML and AI to do prediction, and think about how you pre-stage and organize your content. You've set up a systematic process that's going to then allow you to leverage both humans and AI and machines to accelerate this process and drive more value. Well, thank you, everyone.
Yes,
we appreciate the opportunity today, appreciate your attendance, and thank you so much for your time, and have a good rest of the summit.
I appreciate it.